physical health, and my name is Chris. So tonight we are doing the lesson on relapse. It is my absolute favorite lesson, and I know that sounds a little funny, so I'm going to explain it. It's my favorite lesson because I've come to know it so well, because I've pretty much gotten my relapse and how to prevent it down to a T by doing a relapse prevention plan, and I'm going to tell you about that tonight as I work through it on our acrostic. Slide. Please read with me whenever we have the scriptures up. So we're going to read the scriptures together. Principle 7, reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer in order to know God and His will on my life and to gain the power to follow His will. Step 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Let the message of Christ dwell in you richly. Colossians 3:16. So we're going to start with the R. The R in relapse stands for reserve a daily quiet time. If I don't set a specific time aside, I can't even begin to do anything whatsoever. I can't work on anything in my relapse. I need to first start the process with setting a time and reserving a time. I realized first off that relapse is a process and not an event. So here's where I start. I have to make my time. I've learned I do not achieve recovery just by not using or not doing whatever it is that my struggle or addiction or hurt habit or hang-up is. My recovery involves creating a new life in which it is easier for me not to use. If I do not change my life, then all the factors that contributed to my addiction or my struggle will still be there. But most of us believe we begin recovery by hoping to get our old lives back without the addiction, hurt, habit, or hang-up. Slide. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Mark 14:38. Jesus was tempted. He never sinned, but he was in fact tempted. He wasn't exempt from temptation. So why would we be? Slide. The E in relapse stands for evaluate. I do 2 different evaluations when I do my relapse prevention plan. The first evaluation I do is going over the 3 stages of relapse. There is emotional relapse, mental relapse, and then there is the physical relapse. During emotional relapse, I'm not thinking about using. I remember my last relapse and I don't want to repeat it. But my emotions and my behaviors are setting me up for relapse down the road. Because I'm not consciously thinking about using or relapsing during this stage, denial is a big part of emotional relapse. Self-care is important here, and after following the use of all the tools at my disposal, if by this time I don't change, I become exhausted, wanting to then escape, which moves me into mental relapse. When I mentally relapse, a war happens in my mind. This is where a part of me wants to give in, but part of me doesn't. I go from idly thinking to definitely thinking. Here, plans begin to take place. Lying usually occurs for me. Negative friends and behaviors of the past come into play. I even fantasize about using or abusing or whatever it is that particular struggle is into that area. I'll be thinking about it. When I have a common mental urge to go through with something unhealthy or harmful to myself, I play through to the end, not just the next step. That's the old not believing in just that one drink. That's all I can do. I can do just the one drink. I can have just one drink. And that's where the mentality comes in to not believe in that, to believe in the next step after that. Because I believe that in fact that it's a vicious cycle once you get to that point. I get caught up again and again. When people don't understand relapse prevention, they think it involves saying no just before they are about to use. But that is the final and most difficult stage to stop, which is why people relapse. If an individual remains in mental relapse long enough without the necessary coping skills, clinical experience, has shown they are more likely to turn to drugs or alcohol just to escape turmoil. Physical relapse happens when I go from my thoughts to my actions, when I'm active in my struggle. It doesn't take long if my techniques aren't used. It's hard to stop the process of relapse at that point. I don't think that's where I should focus my efforts in recovery. I think I should focus them prior to this, just because it's just so hard to stop it at that point. So focusing them prior is going to be your best bet, which is why I have the relapse prevention plan. I don't think that, I think that that's not recovery. I think it's achieving abstinence through brute force. Definitely not recovery though. My most physical relapses are relapses of opportunity. They occur when the person has a window in which they feel they will not get caught. Let's be honest, that's how it usually happens. Part of relapse prevention involves rehearsing these situations and developing healthy exit strategies. The second evaluation I do is of my physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual health. Here, I have to be honest with myself and ask, slide. Like in step study, some of you that have done it, you know that it still didn't go to the side view. Oh, there it is. This is where we do our heart check in step study. So I have to ask myself, am I hurting, exhausted, angry, resentful, or tense? This is important to remember because the common denominator in emotional relapse, which is our beginning relapse, that's our first one, is poor self-care, in which self-care is defined to include emotional, psychological, and physical care. Poor self-care long enough leads to feeling uncomfortable, restless, irritable, and discontent. As the tension builds, I might start to think about relapsing again just to escape. So ask yourself daily, have you done a heart check? Slide. Now we're at the L, which is listen to Jesus. So this is where I listen to Jesus to let him show me early warning signs. Emotional relapse, early warning signs for me, or for anyone else, might be bottling up emotions, isolating, not going to meetings, going to the meetings but not sharing, focusing on others, focusing on other people's problems or focusing on how other people affect them, and poor eating and sleeping habits. Mental relapse warning signs, craving for drugs or alcohol or your addiction, thinking about people, places, and things associated with past use and abuse. Minimizing consequences, that's a big one for me. I will minimize the consequences of my past use and abuse. I will also glamorize the past use and abuse. Then we go on to bargaining, lying, thinking of schemes to better control your using, looking for the relapse opportunities, and then lastly, planning a relapse. When we get to physical relapse, well, that's when we're in the action part of it. So that's buying the blades, driving to the ABC store, or picking up that subscription that you really don't need. In addition to looking for some of the warning signs, I also will look at symptoms. Some of the symptoms that we have, which is known as post-acute withdrawal, is mood swings, anxiety, irritability, veritable energy, low enthusiasm, veritable concentration, disturbed sleep. Many of the symptoms of post-acute withdrawal overlap with depression, which is really important because these symptoms are expected to gradually improve over time. Slide. Test everything that is said to be true is true. And if it is, then accept. 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Let everyone be sure that he is doing his very best, preventing without personal satisfaction the work well done, and won't need to compare himself to someone else. Galatians 6:4. Listen to the Lord, hear what he is telling you. Isaiah 1:10. Now we're at the A. The A Relapse stands for Alone in Quiet Time. This is where I'm going to reflect on recognition. The key to relapse prevention is to recognize that relapse happens gradually. It begins weeks and sometimes months before the individual will pick up a drink or a drug. Perhaps there was a job loss or a family death preluding to it. For instance, I'll give you one of my own experiences. I was diagnosed with cancer. I had to have surgery for that. Then I was diagnosed again with cancer. And then I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And then I have a very huge fight with my husband that ended with me in the shower in a depressive episode, cutting myself with a razor. I told Aussie, which is my sponsor, that I had had a relapse, that I had cut myself, and I had no idea where it came from. It came from nowhere, I told her. I hadn't done it in over 2 decades. I mean, it was off the table of a possibility for me. And to which she replied, "There's your problem. Why would you ever take anything off of the table, something that you struggle with?" And she was absolutely right, because I had been predisposed to this, and it was in my toolbox. It would be there forever. I got comfortable, and when I got comfortable, I didn't have a plan. That's why I didn't see it coming. But if I look back now, all those things that happened, and all my emotions that were tied with it, it grew. It was something that did not come from nowhere. It clearly had the signs that were there. One of the goals of quiet reflection is to help me recognize the early warning signs of my relapse and to develop coping skills to prevent relapse early in the process, where the chances of success are at their greatest. So I'm going to recognize what I can do about those warning signs. Slide.
Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10.
Now we're at the P, that stands for plug into God's power through prayer. So when you see signs, you can prevail in His power. That's why we plug into Him. I make time to go to the doctor for healing for my body. So of course I need to make time to go to God for my spiritual healing. One of the main goals of therapy and CR is to help us understand what self-care means and why it's important. Prayer is a form of self-care. A simple reminder of poor self-care, slide, is the acronym HALT. I have to see, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely or am I tired? For some, self-care is as basic as physical self-care, such as sleep, hygiene, and a healthy diet. But for most of us, especially here in recovery, self-care is about our emotional self-care. We need to make time for ourselves, to be kind to ourselves, and to give ourselves permission to have fun. If I'm not in the Word daily, then when I am under stress, I tend to glamorize my past hurts, habits, and hang-up and think about them longingly. I start to think that recovery is hard work and that the addiction was fun. I begin to disqualify the positives I have gained through recovery. The cognitive challenge here is to acknowledge that recovery is sometimes hard work, but addiction is even harder. In addiction, we're so easy. If addiction were so easy, people wouldn't need to quit because they wouldn't have to quit. When I continue to refer to my habit or addiction, my days of that as fun, I continue to downplay the negative consequences of addiction with it. I have to remind myself the end result is unappealing, that the negative consequences I've already suffered and the potential consequences that lay around the corner if I relapse again. So I pray. Slide. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God your needs, and don't forget to thank Him for His answers. Philippians 4:6. Slide. Now we are at the S, that stands for slow down long enough to hear God's answer. Don't let emotions cloud your judgments or decisions here. This is why we slow down. This is tough for me because it requires unbiasedness, and I'm usually anything but unbiased. So when I get to this step, I try to rely on my CBT, which is my cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive therapy is one of the main tools for changing people's negative thinking and developing healthy coping skills. Here is a short list of types of negative thinking that are obstacles to recovery and are topics for cognitive therapy. Conveniently, there are 12, one for each step. Number 1, my problem is because of other people. Number 2, I don't think I can handle life without using. Number 3, maybe I can just use occasionally. Number 4, life won't be fun. I won't be fun without using. Number 5, I'm worried I will turn into someone else that I don't like. Number 6, I can't make all the necessary changes. I can't change my friends. Number 7, I don't want to abandon my family. Number 8, recovery is just too much work. Number 9, my cravings will be overwhelming. I won't be able to resist them. Number 10, if I stop, I'll only start back up again because I can never finish anything. Number 11, no one has to know if I relapse. And number 12, I'm worried I have been so damaged by my addiction that I won't be able to recover. The negative thinking that underlines addictive thinking is usually all or nothing thinking. Disqualifying the positives, the catastrophizing, and negatively self-labeling. These thoughts can lead to anxiety, resentments, stress, and depression, all of which will lead to relapse, can lead to relapse. Cognitive therapy and mind-body relaxation help break old habits and retrain your neural circuits to create new, healthier ways of thinking. All of the 12 things we mentioned, and mighty more of them that we can think of that goes through our minds when we're in those stages, they're all lies. They are lies that our God can combat for us when we take the time to just look in His Word. Slide.
Listen to me, keep silence, and I will teach you wisdom. Job 33:33. If you do this, you will experience God's peace, which is far more wonderful than your mind can understand. It's easy to keep your thoughts and hearts quiet, and then rest as you trust in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4:7.
Now we're at the E. We're at the end here, and this is where you're going to enjoy your growth. So obviously, this is where we're going to celebrate recovery, everyone. Yeah. This is where our celebration is for our goal setting and from learning from our setbacks. The growth stage is about developing skills that you may have never learned and that predispose you to addiction and struggle. Sounds like the spiritual inventory that for those of you that's completed it, doesn't it? Yeah. Things to remember. Setbacks are a normal part of progress. They are not failures. Recovering people tend to see setbacks as failures because we're usually hard on ourselves, unusually hard on ourselves. Setbacks can set up a vicious cycle where we see setbacks as confirming our negative views of ourselves. They are caused by insufficient coping skills and or inadequate planning, which are issues that can all be fixed. A setback can be any behavior that moves an individual closer to the physical relapse. Some examples of setbacks are not setting healthy boundaries, not asking for help, not avoiding high-risk situations, and not practicing self-care. A setback does not have to end in relapse to be worthy of discussion in therapy or in our open share groups. Talk about it and celebrate your recovery. Slide.
Be joyful always, pray at all times, be thankful in all circumstances. This is what God wants from you in your life in union with Christ Jesus. 1 Thessalonians 5:16.
So in conclusion, I'd like to end with a challenge for you to set aside a time to make your own relapse prevention plan. And I've set up a page for you for that that's in the back if you didn't get one. A few other suggestions that come from our relapse program is pray and read your Bible daily, which is something that we've talked about. Make attending your recovery meeting a priority. Slide. Spend time with your family. If they are safe, get involved in service. Slide. I think that's it. Yes, that's it. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Chris.